Hey everybody, welcome back. Tony and I just finished watching the second and third rounds of the NFL drafts. Tony, how you feeling?
Feeling good. I'm a little bit sad because I'm just getting into this having live sports thing. It's becoming a new normal, and I know it's going to be ripped away from me after tomorrow. I've never been more excited for a third round of an NFL draft. It's just I wish we could just prolong this draft. Sometimes it gets tedious, but just having live sports has been nice. It's been it's tough to kind of slog through some of the picks, and I'm sure tomorrow's going to be a little bit tough, but I'm just trying my best to appreciate it while we have it.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but as we got towards the last 10 picks of the third round, I started to feel like Goodell. Like the more he slumped back in his chair, the more I kind of imitated him.
Right, yeah, and I don't know how many times they mentioned him in his chair. It's like they were running out of things to
Yeah.
talk about, because they must have mentioned his chair for like six straight picks.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, today we're just continuing our 20 for 20 series. Obviously, we're focusing on the draft since that's the big thing right now. And this topic is going to be the biggest steal of the draft related to Alabama players. So obviously, Alabama had five guys go today, starting with
Starting
Xavier
with
McKinney,
McKinney, yeah.
36 overall to the Giants. Then cornerback Trevon Diggs went 51st to the Cowboys. Raekwon Davis went 56 to the Dolphins. And then in round three, Terrell Lewis went to the Rams. And Anfernee Jennings went to the Patriots, which Tony might have a thing or two to say about.
Right, definitely. My dad's from New England, so I always followed the Patriots growing up.
Um, Tony will be more excited tomorrow after he gets some coffee, a little bit of sleep. But
Definitely.
so I mean, Tony, the first round guys are fair game. The guys that went today, but obviously there's a couple guys still on the board that'll go tomorrow. Do you have a guy that you can identify as your steal of the draft already?
Yeah, I mean, before I get into that, I do think you're right. There are at least two people I see tomorrow going, defensive backs, Shaheem Carter, a very versatile defense, actually two versatile defensive backs. So you look at Shaheem Carter, a guy that can play any position in the secondary, and then Jared Maiden, a guy that's I think criminally underrated. Alabama led the team in interceptions last season, and a guy that also can kind of play everywhere in the secondary. So I expect both of those guys to get their name called
Mm-hmm.
next just tomorrow or
Mm-hmm.
today, day three of the draft. Um, but y- when you look at it, this is kind of we decided on this question heading into day two of the draft, and it's a little bit tough because Alabama players did so well. I mean, nine selections in the first three rounds. It's kind of hard to pick a steal. The guy I think I would go with though is and I probably could have told you this from the beginning of the draft is Terrell Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was always going to be the steal of this draft because when you look at him, his measurables 6'5", 262, lot of length, can get to the backfield in the split second, can terrorize quarterbacks, but that injury history has made him,
Mm-hmm.
kind of slip in the draft. I think when you look at a Terrell Lewis, you're looking at a first round guy that
Mm-hmm.
just hasn't been able to quite put it together yet. And I think those injuries have hurt him not only from a production standpoint, but from a developmental standpoint as well. He hasn't been able to get on the field for two seasons, so he's still a little bit unpolished in certain areas. He'll have to get better. But I think, if I'm an NFL team, and obviously the Los Angeles Rams were the ones that took him, you look at him and you're like, man, I can do so much with this guy, and I can turn him into a Pro Bowl pass rusher. I think it's really easy to see that. So to get him at what pick did you say he was overall? He's a he's an
Terrell Lewis
absolute
went 84.
84 overall. I mean, geez, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
steal in the third round. I really like that pick.
Yeah, I agree that Terrell Lewis is definitely a steal. Definitely a talented guy when he's on the field, but I kind of see the point. I see why he fell that far. Terrell Lewis, he hasn't just dealt with one injury. He's been multiple injuries, and they've been significant. He's missed most of, if not entire seasons, with his injuries. So, I do get the hesitation. My guy, who I feel like is a solid, should have gone in the first 20 picks of the NFL draft, slipped to day two. Safety Xavier McKinney went to the New York Giants. Now, you know I know that you might say not much of a steal because he basically still went in the first round. But I just, again, McKinney, I just think this is not a guy that should have even been sitting around at 25, 28, 30 yesterday. I think this is a guy that can come in and immediately start for the Giants and be sort of a game-changing player, in the secondary for them, similar to the way Landon Collins played for the New York Giants just a couple years ago.
Yeah, he's a guy that can do it all. I mean, he led Alabama in tackles last season, and he also had 3 interceptions. And we talked about him a
Mm-hmm.
ton. I do like him on the Giants. It is kind of neat to see another Alabama player. Who might take that. Landon Collins did
Mm-hmm.
so well with the Giants, and maybe it'll be a tradition now of Alabama safeties. I felt like Xavier McKinney was the best safety on the board, and yeah, I was a little bit surprised that he slipped down. To the second round. I think once he slipped down to the second round, though, you knew he was going to be taken in that first 5, 6, 7
Mm-hmm.
picks of the second round, like he was. Um, I could have seen him going, like you said, top 20. I know a lot of mock drafts mocked him at 17 to Dallas. I know he had been mocked at 23 to the Patriots, and then kind of like mid 20s, late 20s, in the first round. So the fact that he, dropped down to the second round is a little bit surprising, but I think
Mm-hmm.
he's still at a good spot, and he'll still, have a good contract. It's not like he really saw his draft status just,
Mm-hmm.
decimated today.
And yeah, and the thing I like about McKinney is, like you mentioned, led the team in tackles, but also 5.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 3 picks, 5 pass breakups, 4 forced fumbles, and he blocked a kick last season. I mean, Xavier McKinney just kind of proved that he's gonna be involved in the play no matter where he is when it starts, and that's the
And
kind of like guy I want to see.
he's a guy that, can obviously play um, deep safety, but then he can come in the box. And I think when you're looking at his NFL team, you're going to invest a first or second round
Mhm.
pick on a defensive back like that. You want him to be able to do it all. And so I think the Giants saw that. They saw that versatility of what he can do. They put him in different sets. He's not going to be limited. He's going to see a lot of action, a lot of value on that defense. So definitely a good pick there to have probably the most talented member selected on day two, in my
Mhm.
opinion, definitely. The reason why I went with Lewis is I just think that the Rams got a little bit more
Mhm.
value with their pick just because they got him so late. That being said, I think both picks were excellent picks. I mean, I think when you're looking at Lewis, I probably would have seen him maybe slip into that second round.
Mhm.
And then when I see Xavier McKinney, you could see him slipping into the mid first, not just the first round. So they both kind of slid maybe 20 picks, from what I saw them, going at. So they're both really good picks.
Do you have the confidence that Lewis, either in his, if not his rookie season, but maybe by his second season, do you think he can develop into sort of that game changing, uh, you know, regular, almost every down player? Because you said you view him as like a first round pick. That's the type of guy that you want to take in the first round, and that's sort of why I didn't maybe I'm not as high on Lewis, just because I am a little worried that he might keep missing time. He might miss 3 or 4 games a year, and that's not really what you need in a first round pick.
I am because we've seen it in bursts.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen it. 5 sacks between the 3 games between Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
Then he's been inconsistent. I think that inconsistency just boils down to playing time and,
Mm-hmm.
and, and just being out on the field. I think it's something you see a lot of times in younger players, and in a way, Terrell Lewis, because of his injury, is kind of, well, he's not young in age, he's young in experience, so
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna see some of those growing pains. But when we saw Terrell Lewis at his best, he was,
Mm-hmm.
he, against Tennessee, I remember thinking, this guy is Quinnen Williams game changer
Mm-hmm.
style of what he can do to impact a defense. Obviously, that didn't last.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't able to do what Quinnen did, and that's why he's not a first round pick. But seeing those flashes and that potential really just showed me that it's there.
Mm-hmm. Do you have concern? And I know that it's hard for us to really predict this, but Are you worried about him injury wise, like health wise, entering the league, or do you think that that's something that maybe he's put behind him?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be. I mean, two basically season injuries. I mean, he missed 10 games in 2017 and then the full slate in 2018. He was injured a little bit this past season,
Mm-hmm.
too. So, I mean, you go in with a little bit of concern. Um, that being said, I think, especially at the third round, that risk is worth the
Mm-hmm.
reward.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes me feel really great about that pick in the third round is there's not that type of pressure on Lewis that you'd have on a first round guy. Lewis doesn't have to come in. There's no expectation that maybe he is this game changing face of the defense right away. If they look at Lewis from a health standpoint and they say, "Hey, we want to bring you on a little slower," like you mentioned, he's maybe not quite as polished. He does need to clean some things up in his game. So maybe that first year he can sort of they can bring him along as a pass rusher and then and bring him onto a more complete role as he goes, and that's kind of what I hope that they do with him that first year.
Yeah, definitely. And one player, that I found interested in this conversation and kind of bringing him up now is it's interesting that Lewis wasn't the first, I guess, pass rusher taken.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually Raekwon Davis. And I think if
Mm-hmm.
you would have asked me who was going to be the seventh Alabama player taken, I would have said Terrell Lewis. Obviously, I think
Yeah.
everyone expected the two defensive backs, Xavier
Mm-hmm.
McKinney Raekwon Diggs to be the first two taken on day two. But when you look into like who was going to get into those edge rushers and pass rushers, I think you would have went Lewis, and it was actually Raekwon Davis who, if you look at the stats, had two back to back underwhelming years
Mm-hmm.
after such a great sophomore year. So well, I guess what do you think about Davis and his fit in Miami?
Yeah, I mean, Raekwon Davis going 56 overall shocked me. I thought he might. He was in play in the third round, and if a team took him in the third round, I would be fine with that. I think that was a little early for Davis. I think if you're taking Davis that early, obviously you're looking at his measurables. You're looking at his size, and you're saying, "Hey, we can bring this guy along. We can develop him." And Davis has shown it before, like you mentioned. In 2017, he had 10 tackles for loss and 8.5 sacks as a sophomore. But he just proved the last 2 years when he was asked to sort of be the guy, the starter. You know, he just couldn't quite make that jump. I mean, he was fine, but he wasn't consistent, and that just kind of gives me pause. That's not the type of guy I want to take in the second round if I'm an NFL team.
Yeah, I think when you look at him, it's kind of the same thing with Terrell Lewis, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe not so much from an injury standpoint, but from a potential standpoint, you think gosh, I got this 6'6", 6'7" guy, this mountain of a defensive lineman. I can play him on the edge, or I can play him inside as a D tackle. It's kind of versatile. I love this guy from in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
just a ball of clay I can work with. But then you look at the production, it's just like I think we just kept on waiting for him to just be this dominant player,
Mm-hmm.
and he was good, and I think he to his credit he was double teamed a lot, but it just never developed into that elite,
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Allen or Quinton Williams or just
Mm-hmm.
those guys that you kind of were just thinking he was going to be. It's so surprising after that sophomore year that we weren't talking about Raekwon Davis as a
Mm-hmm.
first rounder, because I thought that he had that potential. I thought he was going to be a slam dunk at that area. It just never really worked out for him.
Yeah, and I think you see this happen to guys sometimes. They have a big freshman year, they have a big sophomore year, and I think fans and even media members, we have these expectations that they're gonna okay, if he could get 8.5 sacks as a sophomore, he could get 12 as a junior, and maybe he can get 15 as a senior. And some guys they just can't make that leap for whatever reason. And Raekwon was definitely one of those guys, but he only had 2 sacks and 8.5 tackles for loss the last 2 years. That's to me, that's not. It's not that he failed to make the leap. He seems to have regressed from just a production standpoint. And one year, I could kind of give a guy a pass on, but 2 years, it's tough. It's really tough to sort of know like what he was dealing with maybe. And but obviously, a lot of potential an NFL team can sort of unearth something there.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, so like transitioning to like a guy like Jennings, it's kind of like the polar opposite of the other two guys. Like you look at Jennings and you're like, maybe that ceiling's not as high. He's not as
Mm-hmm.
sexy of a pick. He's not. I don't necessarily see just Pro Bowl potential with Anfernee Jennings, but I know that if I'm an NFL team, I'm getting a solid guy, and
Mm-hmm.
he's been consistent. He's a worker. He might not have the elite speed and athleticism as Lewis, but I feel like his ground is a lot
Mm-hmm.
higher than Lewis's. Maybe his ceiling's lower, but
Mm-hmm.
I think you go in, and I think the Patriots can be pretty comfortable with the player they're going to get. He's a safe pick at that pick, and I think they know that at least this is going to be a guy that's going to contribute. Even if he's not a star, he's going to be a guy
Mm-hmm.
that's going to matter on that defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I might I might say Jennings more than almost anybody taken today was sort of the safest pick. I think he sort of epitomizes what you want to look for in the third round. He's a guy that can come in, he can contribute. I don't think Jennings is going to come in and be the one of the two or three faces of the Patriots defense next year. But I also think that Jennings is going to come in, and people are Patriots fans and maybe even some casual fans that don't follow Bama. I think they'll know his name before the end of his first season. So,
He's just seems like that hardworking Patriot, kind of
mhm,
like rough, all the stereotypical cliches you can throw in there, lunch pail kind of guy,
mhm.
that just brings it, is going to do well in the cold weather. I'm going to throw out all these cliches at you, but yeah, I think that like when he was picked by the Patriots, I automatically thought like, yeah, duh. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a Patriot player,
That's the first thing Tony did, and then the second thing is he was like, "How do I order an Anfernee Jennings Patriots
Right. I mean, I
jersey
don't know.
and get it shipped
It
here?"
is nice to see some exciting player, or at least players that I know of, not Division II players get selected by the team that I follow. But but no, I think I don't think Anfernee Jennings is necessarily like an exciting player. Maybe I don't know if he's like gonna be the guy that you're like, oh wow, Anfernee Jennings. But at the same time, he's a guy that you don't have to ever worry about. I think he's super solid.
Well, so before we get out of here, I think we hit on just about everybody that went today. We kind of glossed over Trevon Diggs, not to spend too much time on him, but I think Tony, we kind of agree that he's sort of similar to some of the other guys we mentioned. A lot of
High
potential,
potential,
but
inconsistent play kind of guy.
yeah.
Yeah. Great measurables. I mean, that's really been the theme of the people that went day two for Alabama. Great
Hmm.
measurables, a little bit of inconsistency. You could say that Terrell Lewis, that Trayvon Diggs could have been a first round pick as well.
Hmm.
Some people had him going even as high as number 20. But I think he's probably where he belongs at that spot, and I think he could do a lot of things for the
Hmm.
Cowboys. I think he might be a guy that you look back and like we're saying could be a steal, but
Hmm.
there also is some risk that goes with picking him as well.
Yeah, and I have no problem saying if Terrell Lewis can stay healthy, and become sort of that every down kind of player that you think he can. I absolutely think you'll 2 or 3 years from now you'll have won this argument. You'll be right. If Terrell Lewis can stay healthy, he will absolutely be the steal of day two of the NFL, or actually of the whole draft probably. And
Yeah.
then Trevon Diggs, he could develop into that guy, but neither of us kind of feel like he's there yet. So that's sort of why we made the picks we did. But anyways, Tony, it's 11:50. We're about to head into day three of the NFL draft, so we're gonna finish writing some stuff up and get some sleep. And we want to just thank y'all for joining us. Enjoy the day three, and also feel free to comment. Let us know if you think that you agree with our picks. Maybe y'all are higher on Trevon Diggs, or maybe y'all even think that Shaheem Carter or Jared Maiden are the guys that we should be hyping up right now, because some team is going to get a really good defensive back on day three of the NFL draft. And those are the type of guys that you can sort of go to the Super Bowl with. So, like, subscribe, and check back in with us tomorrow. And like I said, just enjoy day three of the NFL draft, because we don't know when we're going to have something like this again. Tony, I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
Definitely.